It's a big panel. It's a full panel. Start with an easy one, guys, and maybe if I can start with yourself, Matt, from a fleet perspective, where you see the opportunities for AI. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about what could happen and where it could go. Where do you see AI being implemented most successfully for the greatest return in the mining sector?
Oh, yeah. You guys got me? Okay. Big question. I thought we said this was going to be a softball question, but well, from our perspective, there are 1,000 shops out there running around especially to all the majors, going, "Hey, AI is going to solve all your problems, and just watch." And all the legacy data problems that we've all struggled with for so long are just going to magically go away. I think that's not the case, right? Like it's very often, I think it's opening up more challenges where you realize, like, actually, there are a whole lot of cans of worms going on. What we think of as a data lake is more like a kind of a series of data puddles. It's kind of a data swamp, and there's a lot of stuff that needs to be cleaned up. And then, of course, there are a whole wave of people that are coming along saying, well, AI is going to clean all that up for you. So then it'll be usable for AI. So for us, I think we've got this big focus on let's go back to basics and make sure that we're collecting data in a way that can be used immediately. And that's what a lot of our customers say to us is, if you care about AI, you've got to care about the quality of your data. We went all the way back down to, well, we're going to care about the sensor itself that generates data, work on that, control that so that it's everything we're generating is clean at inception, and then use that clean data set to go back and clean up some of the other stuff. So I think this industry is still going, well, we still have conversations with people that it's like, okay, I want to talk about AI, and then they start dropping out words like digitization, and you're like, oh no, we're still there, right? Like there's still things in filing cabinets that need to be kind of aired out and digitized. There's still a lot of core that needs to be scanned. So I think yes, it's going to be transformative, and where we're using it is in crunching these huge amounts of new data, these huge new data sets that are coming in. But first, that needs to be clean. And I get it. Like, people say to us, well, Matt, like, that's great. New data is fantastic, but I can't even deal with the stuff that I've already got. Like, it's nice to talk about the future. I think that focus needs to be there on, like, every industry is generating way more data now, doubling every couple of years. You need to be ready for that onslaught. So make sure that that's clean. Then we can get things like massive reductions in or massive increases in drilling hit rates, massive new discoveries. Like things are happening that we can't talk about yet. We're using huge amounts of new three-dimensional data generated and processed in real time using AI to make us all more effective. But there are still problems. I think that's a big discussion point.
And we will discuss that, unfortunately, at length, all the challenges that are going to be ahead of us. Maybe a bit more blue sky thinking. John, where do you see the big opportunities? Like, where could we go if we get past some of the challenges that we are going to talk about?
Wow. Really good question, Chris. I think for us, we're seeing the sky is the limit at the moment, but maybe we need to come back to reality, right? Just for a little while. And I think for us, what we're seeing is, especially with the vendor that we work with, which is IFS, there's a lot of AI adoption that's coming into products and into technology. But how do you bring them all together, and how do you make it work? And I think maybe I can steal first off what we were talking about, what technical challenges we need to think about before we get to blue sky. And I was thinking through a lot of the speakers today. There were 5 things that really resonated with me, and I think this is where we've got to start before we get to blue sky. One of them, well, here's my 5, and then in no particular order, and then no priority either. But for me, I think, Matthew, what you're talking about there is data quality and integration be number 1 for me. I think, we see all these, AI really does depend on the data, right? So I think really we've got to start thinking about a data readiness program before an AI readiness program. That for me is pretty important. Legacy solutions, no real surprise there. I think, you know, we've got to look at some of those products that are out there and how do we effectively integrate with them, and there's some really good products that can then help with that. I think too, the second one for me is like the AI model, which really is, you know, what are you actually producing here? Because we look at it from, you know, predicting like asset maintenance and really helping with the utilisation of assets over a long time. But if you can't explain the why to the person that's looking at that information, you're never going to convince them. So I think that's something that we've just got to think about as we're building this journey, is how do you actually show them the outputs and the outcomes and how did you get there? I think that's a key one for me. The third one, no surprise, I think system performance. So I think your AI digital strategy, sorry Matthew, I shouldn't really be using that word, should I? But I think that's really important because we don't want to see data latency. It's just going to hold us up right in our whole program. Fourth one, and I'm no cybersecurity expert, but I think cybersecurity is really important in this whole transformation journey. And in particular for me, the IP risk. So who actually owns the IP that organisations really do own that, and how do they manage it before it gets out to other third parties? And the last one, surprise, surprise, change management. But maybe we've got to morph that into more of an AI change management strategy instead of just a standard ad hoc change management program. Just some ideas. I know I've kind of gone left of what your question was, but I think we've got to if we get the basics right, then we can really start to look at, you know, where do we want to go.
Okay, and we have got some experts on the change management piece as well sitting with us, so we'll get on to that. Cristian, from a Glencore perspective, in terms of practically using it as a miner, where are you seeing it actually being implemented successfully, or where are you seeing the biggest opportunities for investment in AI?
Yeah, so I think whatever decisions are made, AI can actually help. So in Glencore and in previous experiences, we have implemented AI in all the value chain, really. So I think the question is like when and why you need to implement it there first, you know, and I always land it with ROI, right? So AI, implementing AI, the change management program you need to put behind that to change the operating model of that business unit is not simple. It's actually good effort to actually go through that. And therefore, if you are not tackling your bottleneck in your value chain to actually obtain some ROI, or if you fail, you get some answers or some insights at least and learnings around that, is becoming very critical, right? So everywhere you can implement it really when you have like good data quality. So for me, it's like around data maturity as well. It's like, okay, do we have data maturity? Is that our bottleneck, or we can get a good ROI if we actually do something there? If those questions are yes, then move to the next step. Otherwise, you need to work in asset modernization programs, you know, and that's something I have run in around my career. So I always see AI as the cherry on top, really, you know. So it's the means to an end. It's an additional tool, but it's not the end, right? The end is actually create value for stakeholders, you know, business optimization. That's what you really want to get out of it. If you use AI or you use something simpler, then use something simpler. So at least from my experience, I always going to go through simple things. And then if we are actually pushing the boundaries of optimization and you can use AI because you already have everything integrated, do it. But before that, close your gaps, get more value out of modernization, right? Digitization, as you said. That's not going anywhere, right? So, and AI can help, but I see it as the cherry on top, you know?
Would you see the risk in terms of investment from a mining sector perspective as a over-investment risk in AI from what you're looking at the moment, or under-investment on the opportunity?
I think at the moment, I think it depends of the miner, to be honest, and the appetite for actually technology programs, right? I have worked across 3 different miners so far and 3 different approaches. So I can tell you that depends on where are in the maturity level as a technology piece, you know. So miners that can already operate remotely, for example, they already have a strong foundations around data, and those guys can really, you know, bring an AI program and get cash out of that, you know, because they already did the integrations, the foundations to actually implement AI or machine learning or whatever you want. So on the other side, junior miners that are operating with the basics, right? For them, I see more value in actually doing the basics right first, operational practices, operational excellence, before jumping straight into an AI stuff. If they do AI, they should do it in the asset bottleneck or the value chain bottleneck, where they actually can get ROI.
Michelle, you're working obviously with IMDEX across the value chain, across the processing cycle there. When you're hearing some of the challenges and some of the reference to going back to basics, what's your experience, one, in terms of the quality of data that is there as a foundation to implement potential AI opportunities, and then the different approaches that you're seeing from your clients about how they approach the opportunity and how aggressively they're shaping?
I mean, obviously, and those who know me know I'm not going to disagree when people say that managing the data in the first place is critical. It obviously is. But I think it's interesting. So I was recently introduced to a framework to really talk to, you know, where could you use AI? What are the problems that AI can solve? And the way, you know, I liked it, it's very simple. You know, what are tasks that are you doing repetitively and therefore you can be helped? What are things that you need to do faster than you're doing them today? I think we all know that there's a lot of decision-making processes in mining where we need to do things faster than we do them today. Where do you have good training data? Now, we've talked a lot about data quality today, but I think if you really think about training data as well, this is where I think we really do get exposed in some places in the mining value chain. And the fourth piece is does the AI have to be perfect? Can you be wrong some of the time? If the AI has to be perfect because it's controlling a critical system, you're probably also in trouble. So having said that, I think we get, what we're seeing from customers is almost a dichotomy or a tension between where do we want AI to work, where do we desperately need its help. Now, in the space we play in and all the time in Orebody knowledge, one of those spaces is in pre-drilling, right, in an early stage exploration where we know as an industry we're reasonably ineffective. So people want to do it, but the challenge that people face is that training data piece. It's where we're most exposed. So you're seeing a lot of people trying to make it work, a lot of really smart people, but it's really hard to do. But then you're also seeing people play further along in the mining value chain where there is more data and where the sorts of decisions that you can inform are how should you process this ore. And so I think we're going to see, you know, as I said, in our space, you're going to see the industry try and tackle all of these challenges. I think it's about where are we going to get the most runs on the board to really prove that that we're ready for AI, that they're not just stuck at digitisation, that we're ready for AI rather than destroying value.
We've also got quite a unique set of experience across the panel in terms of other industries besides mining, and it's probably a great opportunity to actually look at where other industries that you guys are exposed to are doing it well and maybe not so well, and what the mining industry could borrow from other sectors in terms of hopefully doing it better than we might otherwise have. And Adam, maybe I can start with you on that one, given your perspectives at IBM for cross-industry.
Absolutely. I mean, just riffing off what everyone's saying, all of these things are true, and yet for me the thing that's most relevant to all industries is really imagination. What are people in each of your companies right now thinking about, you know, how might we use this new technology? Obviously the flavour of the month at the moment is a generative AI, because it's very accessible, it's easy to understand, it's incredibly easy to implement, as opposed to, you know, some previous experiments we've run over the last 10 years around machine learning where, you know, you would have a grand idea, generally required a high amount of investment, generally required really good training data, and those things were really hard to sustain. And typically what we saw is that, you know, people would lose interest or would get to the point where we'd go to deploy this and use it, and like you mentioned, if it's something around a critical system, people get a bit nervous about that. I think, and going back to imagination, what I'm seeing in clients that I work with is that when you allow people to play a little bit, when you allow them to think about their own individual workflow, they start to come out with really, really interesting use cases for it. So I've seen some really fantastic ones around safety. One that is not something that people would typically think about with AI, but safety on site. But how often do work parties receive a 100-page work pack? I can guarantee you, having been out there many times to watch them do their work, they're not reading the whole thing, right? We often ask them to engage and say, all right, well, what are let's do a step back 5x5 or, take 5 or whatever you call it in your company. What are the things that could hurt you today or could induce risk? Wind, sun, fatigue. All right, great. What about if we use AI to pull out something extremely specific from that exact work pack, relevant to the people who are actually on the job, to give you some really meaningful discussion, right? So that's the sort of use case that only comes out by thinking through what are the actual ways that we can use this. I think the other one is really about, going back to your decision-making comment before, Cristian, is when does it matter? What's the extra data that we need? What's the extra decision-making power, prompts, suggestions, ideas that could make our decision better, faster, more durable? Could we use AI to do change management better now that we've made the decision? All right, how do we communicate it better? How do we communicate faster? So these are the things that I think can be brought in that completely, can cross over into any industry. And really, what I'd encourage everyone to be doing is really thinking about how can I play a little bit personally, as I get into this, recently I learned how to make agents, right, with Microsoft Copilot. Whoa. Once you realize how easy that is and you think, okay, I can make an agent in 20 minutes. I've made 5 agents, which are now, I'm from IBM Consulting, right? This is now part of my standard workflow. You get your PowerPoint, you get your software, and you get your agent to help embed it from a change management point of view. So this is now just standard practice for us, but you only see these opportunities once you go and do it.
John, could I get a view on that?
Yeah, I think we work in a couple of different industries or verticals there. Maybe I could summarise them between manufacturing and mining, because there are a lot of synergies, right, around 4.0, moving towards 5.0. For us, what we see is, depending on how complex the manufacturer is, maybe they're an engineering firm helping to build a new processing plant, a lot of steel, a lot of fabrication, a lot of complexity with that, through to from a manufacturing firm that is building a bucket, right, thousands of buckets an hour. The scheduling and optimization between how you manufacture to how you plan and schedule maintenance and those key work orders, the logic that we've seen in a lot of applications now is key, and it's the same, but they can transition it across between the two. I think that's the key that we've seen, and there's a lot of benefit to it as well, especially when, hopefully there's no maintenance planners in the room, but if you can pretty much, schedule a whole plan for your workforce for a whole roster for a fortnight, that's pretty powerful, especially if you know one particular one particular team takes longer to do an activity than someone else. So, having that type of model and data to feed into a scheduling and planning tool is very, very powerful. It's just some things that we've seen as well.
Michelle, you're nodding along a lot there. What's resonating there in particular?
Yeah, I think it's back to our favourite topic around data and how we corral it. The other sector that we have, increasing exposure to and have been looking at is the energy sector, who have a lot of, similarities in the way they do some of the parts of our business. And one of the things that they've been really good at is the setting up of open standards for data sharing. And I think, another piece for us, and particularly to do that with a lens to, if you're going to use the data for AI, then how does the data have to show up? And so I think there's some, it's not something historically mining's been very good at, how you put those collaborative layers in place to really free the data up for AI purposes. And so that's certainly something that we are looking to bring in. The other thing I would just say as an observation is it's also AI as a leveller, I think is really interesting. We are used to thinking of ourselves as being behind as a mining sector. Certainly we talk all the time about how far behind energy we are, but actually we're all adopting these AI tools at the same time, and it's really enabling us potentially in some areas to leapfrog steps in the process that people had to take because they were here before the technology was in place. And so I also see there's opportunity here for us to not just learn from other industries, but actually leapfrog up to where they are today rather than having to take their whole journey.
And the industry is quite bad at these things. I think that the numbers are there. Last numbers I saw was something like 5 to 15 million per site per year on failed pilot programs and a tech debt. A lot of optimism around AI, but is the mining industry in a position where it can actually learn from those mistakes and execute differently so it's not another missed opportunity?
I feel like the change management expert should take this, but I would.
Well, I wouldn't mind. So we'll go into the change management piece, but I wouldn't mind looking at just that technical execution, because I know a lot of it has been around skills and it has been around change management, but there is a piece around just not actually executing and implementing technology and interoperability as well, which we've talked about.
And I think interoperability, a good word, and another frame that we think about all the time is don't think of it as a tool. If all you think you're doing is taking a tool or a new widget and putting it into the process, you're definitely going to fail. How do you make it a solution that you're going to put in that actually doesn't just move the problem to somewhere else, right? I think AI in particular is going to expose us to this. If we put in something that massively improves productivity here and do nothing about the rest of the system, then we're going to fail. And I think this is the way that we've failed a lot before. So I think really standing back and talking about, either finding the places where AI very naturally fits, that was a beautiful use case that you illustrated, or saying actually, an example we talk about is Blast Dog. For those of you who have seen our stand, our pretty Tiffany blue Blast Dog, it creates pics of tops of surfaces. If it stopped there, that would be really actually unhelpful. We'd be just chucking a lot of data at an end user who couldn't do anything about it. The whole workflow is to take that data, turn it into a service, make it into a blast plan that a mining engineer can use to plan their blast. And so you figure out as a technology provider that if all you do is this little bit, you haven't actually unlocked any value at all. You actually have to take on all of the workflow, all of the places where the constraints are, and solve for the whole thing. And so I think that more holistic view around solution and workflow rather than tool fix problem is a big bit.
Cristian, these are the things that you're doing presumably on site at the moment. What does it look like from a practical perspective with Glencore?
In terms of
just in terms of where you actually implement AI, where you see the opportunity and how you avoid that issue where potentially on a large site where one team is very aggressively seeing the opportunity and pursuing that opportunity, and other parts of the process are potentially maybe even scared of the process, and we'll get to that change management piece. But how are you managing that, keeping it all linked up?
Yeah, so I think in mining people, I'm also a mining engineer, so we are very tangible people, right? So we like to see what's going on, how it works, to actually trust it, right? And it's just because the industry is a risky industry, right? So something that I really have implemented when I deliver a successful program is the go and see. So, I bring people from other sites when the other site wants to implement the same solution to actually come and talk to the operators, to the people on the ground who is actually using the tool, so they can have an open conversation in terms of what it works, what doesn't work, what the tool does and what the tool doesn't do, right? And also feedback about the vendors, right? Because that's very important as well. The thing is, when you bring people along, they can actually talk the same language because they have similar challenges, right, across the site. And a good way to convince them is just go and see how it works, and it's, in my mind, it's like a cheap way to do change management because, you can bring, sometimes I have people from Africa to South America or the opposite, because we try to implement things where it actually makes sense. As I told you, we try to implement things when we have a business opportunity, not for the sake of it, but when we're actually going to get some free cash flow out of it. So if the challenge there is in the mine, but in this other side is in the plant, And now we are moving into the planned implementation in this other side. I fly the people from there to the other side, so they can actually talk each other. Or today, everything can be done through Teams as well, right? To video conference. So that's a really good way to bring people along and around change management. The good thing is they also, stay connected afterwards because they create a relationship. So then when they are actually in the implementation stage, the modeling stage, the deployment stage, they call the guys from the other side, what you guys did here, what happened here, and they share the experience. And they talk, a language that essentially they can speak and relate. Something that I feel when I was in operations, like back in the day, we have a lot of technical people coming to the site trying to speak the jargon, and we don't manage the jargon, and we are too busy managing safety, cost, and production to actually understand what else is out there, So, putting people from the same business unit talking together, they can essentially help you to deploy and avoid that, create that tangible thing of how it works.
We're desperate to talk about change management, obviously. Adam, let's start with you. Obviously, that's primarily like a core part of your role. What stands out is it absolutely fundamental? Is it the biggest barrier ahead of the opportunity with AI?
Well, I want to riff off what Cristian just said. I 100% agree with your approach. And just linking it back to your previous question around tech debt and POCs and so on, I want to flip the conversation. So this whole title of this panel is around AI and digitisation. That's the solution. Let's fall in love with the problem and say, all right, well, what is the problem that we're actually solving? And stop thinking about things as a POC. POCs are about proving the capability of a potential, solution, and then we go out and we see, whether or not we want to use that. Think of more, I come from more of an agile point of view, and that's typically the way that we'll deliver, and we do what's called MVPs, minimum viable products. And you could say, well, is a POC an MVP? No, because the MVP is really your first attempt at solving that problem, whereas a POC is around, can I test that this solution will work, right? It's quite a different mindset shift as saying, all right, well, we know what the problem is. We've just fallen in love with it. We spent a lot of time doing research, sending people out to where our users are, whether that's on site or it could be in the head office or, somewhere in warehousing or anywhere else in between, right? Where is the problem? How might we solve it? Does it have to be AI? No. In many cases in this industry, it's about saying, well, you're doing a paper-based solution where your part of the process doesn't have one piece of information from the other part of the process. Well, okay, cool. Can we make a really rapid, small app to get you guys talking together? Yes, that might be our MVP. From there, like you were talking about before with sensor data, maybe we start to collect something more, right? So change management is not an activity, and this is obviously something that happens everywhere, right? Change management is an afterthought. Change management starts from the first day of your research of that program. Going out there, talking to the people, finding out what they actually need, thinking about how we might solve it, so having a bit of lightness to how you think about your solution, right? So don't go out there and say, all right, we're going to have a POC and then we're going to consider it. No, go out there and try to solve it. If it works, fantastic. Is that enough? All right, we'll stop. Is it not enough? Okay, iteration number 2, we'll continue to get funding for it. I think it's a mindset shift more than a technology problem. That's how I think of it. And going out there and, like you said, we've implemented something. Can we get someone else to come and talk to them? Because that's the start of the change management for the next group. And that's also making those people on site the champions of their own project. So this to me is the heart of it. It's not about any clever techniques or great PowerPoint packs or top-down leadership. It's about, are you talking and thinking about the people who actually have the problem?
I love this, if I may. We talk about this all the time, that it's not like, there's failure in every industry. Like, we all fail. It's more, the measure of success is more about how fast you can test your hypothesis. And that's what the software industry did, and talked about, agile software development. Build an MVP, quickly test it, see if you can get feedback, and then move on and keep moving. I think look at an old industry that was affected by that philosophy, right? Software engineers and software billionaires moved into the space industry. We're a space company. and kind of we've seen this happen over the last 10, 15 years. All these software guys rock in and say, cool, let's start failing fast and testing hypotheses quicker. And so now you've seen a lot of blowy-uppy rockets, right? Like, we didn't have that for a long time. It was very government-focused, very, very, like, slow, entrenched industry. All government employees trying to build rockets perfectly the first time. And so now we're making a lot more progress as an industry because software people got involved and changed it. And now what we're seeing is those space people, us included, are starting to get really interested in rocks. And so here we are now. You're going to see more of this kind of cross-industry pollination where we're coming in going, hey, whether it's on Earth, whether it's an asteroid, whether it's the moon, they're all rocks, and we're interested in how we test hypotheses faster. So I think it's like, it's being comfortable with this idea that, like, it's fine to fail, but, like, I should care about how quickly I can gather data from each experiment. And you see that in greenfields exploration, you see that in resource expansion and Orebody knowledge. You want to be thinking about the suite of technologies you can bring to bear to test your hypothesis much, much faster and for lower cost if you can. But that's what's happening in this industry now. We call it agile geoscience. We had agile software development, agile aerospace, and now agile geoscience is kind of the name that we give to what we're all kind of weirdly experiencing in this industry, where you've got people from IBM coming in, you've got people from the space industry coming in. It's strange, feels uncomfortable. We're here, we're sorry. But we call it agile geoscience. That's the change that we're seeing.
I think, and this is something I bet that Matt, you guys talk about all the time as well, is I think inherent in this too is, you know, how do mining companies and tech companies work together to solve a problem, to your point, and that should be what the definition of change management is. I think sometimes change management gets replayed back as tech company trying to introduce this tech, resource company has change management problem so they can adopt the tech. That shouldn't be what it should be at all, right? It should be these two groups of people together are trying to solve a problem and to together manage the change around how that problem gets solved.
Production people, operations people, incredibly forgiving, right? But change management and all project success starts with listening. You got 2 ears, 1 mouth. If you listen to the people with the problem, you'll be more successful.
You guys are making change management exciting now. You're talking about agile, it's exciting, and science is exciting. I wonder if we should also weave into this the ROI discussion that our IBM colleagues had, which is, and I think you were touching on it, right? MVP, ROI doesn't have to be at the end, right? It needs to be through the whole journey, and, you know, it's about looking at, we call it business value engineering, right, or business value assessment. But it's looking at, you know, whether it's half a dozen key tasks or activities up to 20, right? But they all should be woven through exactly what we're talking about here today, right? How are they realised through the journey, not at the end?
Yeah, because if it's big bang at the end, right, people get bored, they lose hope, they get too scared, they run away.
Exactly. Yeah.
Runs on the board, right? So we talk about DVF, right? Desirability, viability, feasibility. If you can't prove those three things, viability is, you know, can the business support it or will they support it? Desirability, do the users want it? And feasibility, can we build it? Not can it be built, but can we build it, right? So if you can't satisfy all of these, you probably shouldn't start. But if you can't prove early on that there's success, get runs on the board, show value, show that the users want it, show that they're really using it, you're going to struggle, and you're never going to get to that end of the line calculation because people have lost interest.
It all sounds great. I think the reality is that it's not happening though. So, you know, Michelle, you talked about that partnership. The industry is not good at building these partnerships and executing on these partnerships. Does anyone want to jump out there and suggest why that might be? And I don't want to look at Cristian being the miner sitting here, but like, does anyone have a view on why we aren't building these partnerships as an industry, and why aren't we better at change management given it's identified as being such a fundamental blocker?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's part of the how we see the problems and probably early collaboration, you know. Industry sites are in remote areas and always difficult to go there and to get people to work in there, right? And when you actually get people to work in there, they're quite busy with whatever they have on the table already. So I think it's probably, I feel sometimes there's some lack of empathy and there's no space to actually understand what the solution can do for you at the beginning, right? Even one of my success criteria around digital transformation is always been putting the accountability in the operation or the end user. So the product owner in my projects always should be in the operations, never in the technology team, never in the OEM, or never in the vendor, always in the end user. And then I get my operational stakeholder, Cristian, you're going to give us more work to do, right? But then you need to figure out how to backfill that position on the background from the operational side and give that person space to dedicate time for the project. That collaboration needs to be understood from both sides, and sometimes I feel that consultants or vendors, they don't distill the information enough before putting it into the operations or into your end client to make it easy to understand and digestible. So that's a general feedback I give to everyone. It's like, this is too complex. Even for me, that I'm technical and I study computer science, don't throw that to the guys on the side. I mean, you need to distill the information, and we don't have 2 hours to actually learn about it. You need to make it easy to digest. So that lack of empathy from both sides, I think, is very important. That something needs to be addressed from the beginning, and from there you can build relationships and trust, because it's about trust at the end of the day in this industry. Yeah.
I haven't got a huge amount of time left, but we also have got 4 vendors sitting on the panel. So, I mean, putting it back to you guys, I mean, how much of an emphasis internally when you have a project and you're going in to partner with a mining company is there on a genuine partnership, being there and doing that education piece, and then not just walking away, staying there for that after sales piece as well, and making sure that everyone is comfortable with the result and it's working successfully?
Well, just quickly, because I know we'll leave time for everyone else. We tend not to start the project unless we have that buy-in, right? So we always insist that we have a client product owner who's from the division where it comes from. We always insist that there are SMEs from that division as well who are specialists on that. Without that, we're probably not going to succeed, right? So we expose our method, we show it to the client, we want them to use it because it makes them more successful, and then they'll come back to us again.
Yeah, and I mean, I would say that I think we use the word, it's in there, right? Partnership, that's a 50-50 thing. So I think our acceptance is that we have to take 50%. That can be a big deal for some tech providers, right? Especially if you're still small and starting up. The commitment to truly take the 50% of the load to enable these things to be successful. But the reality is if you don't do it, you're not going to succeed. It's that simple.
Yeah, I think we're living in a really great time, actually, because I understand from the mining company's perspective, you need companies of a certain scale to come to you, like with a lot of their shit worked out, basically. The really baby startups, and we've been there, it's a nice plaything, but it's hard to adopt, right? But we're living in a time now where Silicon Valley has realized, like, if they want all the data centers they want to build, they need to fix the copper problem, and so they're happy to splash money around to scale up businesses so that I think they can actually inject technology into the mining sector, which is really hard. It's a hard industry. And a lot of these problems, like you're saying, Cristian, it's just really tough out there. So I think now I'm excited about this because now we're seeing a lot more capital being injected in the mining tech sector, so that I think we can come to you with a lot more of our, the rough bits kind of obscured. We've figured that out, we've wrapped the technology as a whole product, and now we can say, cool, you can adopt this, it's much, much easier to understand. So I'm really hopeful about where we are now. It's been hard historically, but there are new huge pools of capital, billions of dollars coming into the sector now. We can make some really magic stuff happen.
I think too, as a systems integrator or a business partner, it is, you've got to put some skin in the game, right? You've got to be part of this journey. Starts with that business value assessment. I think that's really key. But long term, how are you going to work with the client to see that end result and that realisation? I think that's key for us. I think it's easy to talk the talk, but you've also got to walk the walk, haven't you? So I think that's key for us. Maybe it's part of our DNA, something that we really talk really key up front with our clients.
That is all we've got time for. We drifted a little bit away from AI there. My apologies. Hopefully it was still informative and valuable for you. I think I'm handing back to John now
Thank you, Chris. Yes, we have reached the end. It was 2.5 hours of interest, but I guess, you know, if we just look at what we summarised today, and if there's any takeaways, for me, you know, mining's future will be defined really on how we connect the data, the technology, and the people that we've been talking about, to really drive that genuine operational intelligence. So enjoy the rest of IMARC, and I hope there's some more informative sessions like today as well. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.